So my generation probably remembers the Cold War as the chapter at the back of the history textbook that we never had enough time to learn about in any detail. But we know the long and short of it. America and the USSR pretended to like each other just long enough to give Germany a good whooping, and then they both held the world hostage with the threat of thermonuclear Armageddon. But I want to point out, as inevitable as it may seem, having a Cold War wasn't part of the plan. As a matter of fact, hopes were very high during World War II that the rest of the century was going to be nothing but roses. After all, with the Axis in ruins and, well, most of Europe in ruins too, the Allies were looking at a clean slate. Fascism was gone, mostly, and while capitalism and communism were radically different, in theory, both the USA and USSR were opposed to the kind of militarism and expansionism that had driven the Germans to war, and they had the opportunity to quite literally create a new world order, to change the rules to make the world a safer place. That's what they wanted to do. The problem, of course, is that their ideas of peace looked very different. This video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. Swear to God, we got 'em. You can't leave, the doors are locked. Probably you've seen people shouting at you about free gems and epic spell tomes and skull knights, but like, what actually is it? It's an RPG streamlined to its purest form. Evil bad guy throws the world into darkness, and I was actually surprised when I picked it up how many RPG mechanics they hit you with out the gate. Status effects, buffs, debuffs, crit chance, damage types, gear upgrades. It's an RPG. 2 twists. There's a truck ton of playable characters. Kind of like you upgrade your characters with better loot, you can upgrade your party with better characters, which is good if you want a decent crack at the endgame. The Doom Tower, which can only be said in that voice, is a giant prison in the endgame with some of the toughest bosses Raid will throw at you, so a solid party is a must. Second twist, no overworld. You push 3 buttons, you're snapped right into combat. It's a quick casual game I can pick up on the bus or when I show up somewhere and my friend arrives 15 minutes late because they live in their own time zone. Believe it or not, there is also a competitive scene. They've recently updated the game with a new clan league. I have to say, I was not expecting that. If you've never played it before, they give you a bunch of free stuff if you use the link in the description. That helps you get more gear and characters to play with and figure out what you like. Now is an especially good time to pick it up because they're giving away all kinds of in-game goodies and real-life prizes for Halloween. Just download Raid, go to raidyard.plarium.com and enter your ID. Efforts to reunite the global community began in 1942 with a captivating little document I like to call the Atlantic Charter. Mostly because that's what it's called, the Atlantic Charter. Britain and America wrote this little booklet outlining their vision for a brighter tomorrow, and everyone liked it so much, including the Soviet Union, that they made it official. The Allies took on the official name of the United Nations, and this, in writing, is what they were all fighting for. Once the Nazis were gone, there would be no one left who could oppose the right to self-determination, freedom of the seas, and a world free of want and fear. Just like what happened in World War I, this ambitious list of ideals was spearheaded by the American president. Now with World War I, that didn't really go so great. President Wilson got a Nobel Peace Prize for creating the League of Nations, and then America never joined. And the League could do basically nothing against the imperial ambitions of the Axis, so in World War II, it just stopped existing. When it came to the United Nations and President FDR, he was in some ways a lot more pragmatic. Unlike the League of Nations, where every nation was equal and could gum up the process and nothing could get done, FDR's plan was for the world to be governed by the world police, including the Soviet Union, the loose cannon who never stops until he gets his man. America, the renegade defender of freedom who shoots first and asks questions later. Britain, the razor-sharp detective who plays by his own rules. And China, whose job is to babysit Japan and agree with America. Everyone else? Every other country on the planet was going to be disarmed of anything more powerful than a rifle. And because the winners of World War II were such good friends, they would agree on their policies forever for the sake of world peace. Clearly, during the war, the Allies had a lot of trust in Stalin. Prime Minister Churchill said, "Poor Neville Chamberlain believed he could trust Hitler. He was wrong." But I don't think I am wrong about Stalin. FDR said of him, "I just have a hunch that Stalin is not that kind of a man. I think that if I give him everything I possibly can and ask for nothing from him in return, he won't try to annex anything and will work with me for a world of democracy and peace." But yeah, once it came time to start coordinating with Stalin, it was clear he had different goals for what the world of 1950 should look like. I've had about enough of this. I was only joking. Come back. Stalin is not a man who solves his problems with purges. Then let's be serious. What are your intentions when the war is finished? I will begin by reclaiming my borders. Does that include half of Poland? Yes, including Poland. You mean the same country we're at war with Hitler for taking half of? It's no worry. Poland will have part of East Germany to make up for it. You know, Winston and I have been talking, and we feel it's very important that Germany not be put in the same position post-World War II as it was post-World War I, or else they'll be back for revenge in 20 years. I'm taking the Baltic states too. You also agreed with us that the right of a people to self-determination is paramount. Within reason. Not helping, Winston. Stalin, you said you agreed with the Charter. At the very least, you must see the importance of democracy in Eastern Europe. Do not worry. Will the Red Army occupy all of Eastern Europe? Yes. Could you stop me from forcibly Sovietizing half the continent? No. But just because I like you, I will do it democratically. Britain did have contingency plans in place for declaring war on the USSR if Stalin broke his promises for Poland, and FDR saw the Baltic states as a major point of contention. If there was a time to pressure the Soviets militarily for breaking the rules they'd all agreed to, it would have been while the war machine was already hot. So, Stalin gave Eastern Europe a form of democracy so buried in quotation marks it began to look like razor wire. You see, there weren't a lot of communists left in Eastern Europe after the Nazis went and purged them, so it was up to the Soviets to organize, support, and occasionally militarize new communist parties. To broadly overgeneralize, at first it was a simple matter of getting these parties some seats in a democratic government, and then, after a couple of years, hey, rig an election here, stage a coup there, and would you look at that, suddenly the Communist Party has complete authority. By that point, FDR was dead and Churchill was out of office, and whatever veneer of optimism they may have had for Stalin was gone. The US was particularly spooked because even places the USSR wasn't occupying were starting to turn towards communism. Stalin had actually made a secret deal with Churchill to stay out of Greece, but because Yugoslavia was communist, they really wanted Greece to be communist. And China. Dear old China, America's eastern ally whom FDR had put on the UN Security Council to be another voice against the Soviets, that government was also falling to a communist revolution. Now, the US had a plan to bolster their own support, and to their credit, it wasn't a bunch of coups, it was a bunch of money. The US, as the one country virtually unharmed by the war, was going to give out huge economic aid to any country that agreed to open their markets to foreign trade, effectively trying to bring them into the capitalist fold. Broadly speaking, it was a huge success. France and West Germany were quickly back up on their feet, and in France at least, the message was received loud and clear. You can either have communist ministers in your cabinet, or you can have money. Some members of the Eastern Bloc were curious about the whole thing, but as soon as Stalin heard about the requirement to open international markets, he politely yet firmly placed his hand on their shoulders and told them they didn't want that money, actually. The US sort of had the next hand in escalations. With both Germany and Korea, the plan during the Second World War was to bring them back together, but the US calculated that if the country reunited in full, even if it were strictly pledged to be neutral, it would end up being influenced by the Soviets sooner or later. So the US took the step of taking all of the non-communist parts of the country and declaring them effectively independent. The Soviets did not take to the creation of West Germany and South Korea well. Obviously, that's where East Germany and North Korea came in, but it was more than that. Berlin, which had previously been the capital of Germany, was also split in half between East and West, and that's not because it was right in the middle of the country. It was, in fact, smack dab in the middle of East Germany. Stalin tried to force the Allies' hand by laying a devious trap. He closes off all the roads and all the rail lines, shuts down power to the Allied-occupied zones, and blockades the city. If West Berlin wants supplies and money, it's either gonna come from the East, or the USA is gonna have to start a war. But Truman had other ideas. Please don't shoot, please don't shoot, please don't shoot, please don't shoot. Sir, the Americans are sending supplies by plane. God's darning! Are we going to shoot them? No, they'll never keep this up. They did. It was a huge logistical challenge, but the Allies pulled off a level of coordination and precision seldom seen outside of wartime. And so war was averted for the time being. But if Stalin was going to use the threat of war to have his way, then by gum, America was going to be ready for war. NATO was formed in 1949 with its famous Article 5 declaring that an attack against America or any of her allies was an attack against all of them together. But then, mere months later, the Soviet Union got the bomb. All the rising tension of the 1940s never went away. It just all of a sudden had nowhere to go without destroying all life on Earth, except into an endless stream of proxy wars. The Cold War was on.